Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Now, a lot of people say Timothy Leary right away, and the first thing we think is LSD, because you actually took LSD when it was legal?
Uh-huh, yeah.
Okay, now this was part of what? An experiment? Tell us about it just a little bit.
Well, you're probably addressing the situation that many of the people in this audience here and many out there probably never heard of me. Don't you think that's...
You mean because they're too young?
Yes, after all, 20 years ago, many of these people... No, okay. So...
Oh, we have some seniors, too.
I know. Seniors means over 30, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So maybe we should explain just briefly that, boys and girls, there was a time called the 1960s and 70s when things were very different than they are in the Rambo, Reagan, Pitbull 80s. It was a time when people actually went around smiling, and there was a sense of friendliness. People could hitchhike without being mugged. People were talking about peace,
love,
and opening your mind. And yes, it was now it's kind of maybe went a little too far and being a little too spiritual, but still, it's very different. And many people, for example, Mr. Reagan announced yesterday that the 60s were a terrible time because he was not allowed to go to college campuses in his own state in the 1960s. Well, it's kind of interesting, isn't it, how things have changed? Well, the reason for that was that the college students in the 1960s and 70s didn't like what was going on in the Pentagon, and they didn't like what was going on with racism and, you know, this, that, and they wanted changes. So naturally, Mr. Reagan was unpopular back then, and he thinks that's a terrible time. Well, many of us think that things were pretty good back then, and thank you.
And, you know, I agree in the sense that I was a product of the 60s, but now I never got into the drugs, all right? But a lot of folks did, and you did as well. And he seems to be blaming that, you know, the the whole drug problem on the people in the 60s and the 70s. Is
me,
that...
me, including me, yeah.
Okay.
I'm glad you asked that question because it gives me a chance to answer it. Now, when you say drugs, what do you mean? Time magazine had a cover story a week ago. It said, should we legalize drugs? Well, come on, the most dangerous drugs are already legal. Nicotine kills 300,000 people a year. Alcohol, 100,000. Cocaine is terrible, kills 700. And marijuana, it has killed 25 people in the last 25,000 years.
So are you saying you approve or disapprove of these drugs?
Yeah. I got to point out that when Ronald Reagan talks about drugs, or when you see these commercials, they're not talking about the vegetables and plants that we were using in the 60s and 70s, and many people still are using. I'm talking about the psychedelic plants, the marijuana and mushrooms and LSD and peyote. These are not drugs in a sense. They don't affect your body at all.
Let me just...
Today... Yes, go ahead.
Interrupt you 1 second. If you had to explain who you are, you've got to explain the term psychedelic, because we threw that one around all the time in the 60s.
Oh, I know. Psychedelic means mind-opening. Now, drugs that are popular today, booze, crack, cocaine, heroin, don't open your mind. They close your mind. They affect your body. If you have pain, take heroin. If you're kind of feeling low, pop or toot some cocaine and you're off and running. But your mind, unfortunately, is narrower and narrower. So there's a tremendous difference between drugs today, which I have nothing to do with these drugs at all. Oh, I have a beer now and then, but, and the...
no more LSD?
I still, as an adult, will use any psychedelic drug I want to, anytime I want to, because I don't want to have Ed Meese telling me how to run my brain and my mind.
Okay. There's a lot of people who go along with they don't want Big Brother telling them what to do necessarily. But on the other hand, are you afraid of side effects? Did you ever have any? Because they talked about brain damage, they talked about flashes, they talked, you know, kind of going off into space
Who's
here and coming back.
Who are they?
Well, you know, it's hard to pinpoint names specifically, but it was written about in articles, and the medical community even warned us about it.
No, not the medical. No, leave the medical community out of this. Ask any doctor, and he'll tell you that there's never been any brain damage associated with psychedelic drugs. Matter of fact, psychedelic drugs are extremely easy on the body because they don't affect the body.
So you're saying you have no side effects whatsoever from these things, from taking LSD?
There can be psychological side effects because they do open you up and show you new things, but physically to your brain or your body, no.
You said something interesting once in an interview. You said that a lot of people who took LSD are now real savvy about computers.
That's true, because you see what you're talking about here is the head experience, the mind experience, opening up your mind. So naturally, if you were interested in doing that 15 or 10 or 5 years ago, actually, we could not understand the effects of psychedelic drugs on the mind 20 years ago because we used ideas, metaphors like opening valves and the unconscious would come out.
Mm-hmm.
That's like plumbing from the 19th century. Now we understand about the computer, that the brain is a collection of computers, and you can boot it up and activate it and turn on different circuits, and you put in new programs, and you reprogram yourself. All this stuff about, we heard this earlier program today about changing yourself, that has the notion that the brain is this incredibly complicated computer that you can change. And when you put in new ideas, you're changing your mind.